As I stood in front of what should have been our dream house, the keys felt overwhelmingly heavy in my hand. David and I had invested 3 years crafting every detail, from the exposed beams to the wraparound porch where we envisioned growing old. Yet it now belonged to Amber, his 23-year-old mistress, sold for less than the cost of a coffee. I'm Rebecca Mitchell, 35, and never imagined I'd start over, not while watching my husband of 12 years pack with the smugness of someone who thought he'd triumphed. "We built this house," I insisted, my voice firmer than my emotions. "Actually, I built it," David countered without looking up. "All the paperwork has my name because you were engulfed in your law practice to bother with the so-called tedious details." I had indeed trusted him entirely with the construction while I focused on my burgeoning career as a real estate attorney. "So, you really sold it to her for $1?" I inquired, scrutinizing his reaction. His grin stretched wide. "Yes, Becca, a perfectly legitimate transaction. $1 is valid for property transfer. The deed's recorded. There's nothing left for you." Just hours ago, I had found a crucial document hidden amongst construction papers, a document revealing David wasn't as astute or meticulous as he assumed. "You're right," I murmured. "The deed is indeed recorded comprehensively." My tone elicited a momentary flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "What's that supposed to imply?" he asked. "Nothing," I replied, turning toward the exit. "I hope you and Amber enjoy this house, but you might want to scrutinize the fine print first." "What fine print?" he called after, but my thoughts had already shifted. I drove to my office, my mind replaying everything. 2 weeks earlier, a colleague hesitantly brought me a document, a property transfer of our dream house from David to Amber Collins for $1, dated 3 days prior. It felt as though the ground beneath me vanished momentarily, yet my shock quickly solidified into resolve. Being a real estate attorney, I understood he had underestimated my expertise. I dedicated the following days unearthing every construction-related document David had managed all these, citing the convenience of having everything under his name due to his overseeing role. I had trusted him implicitly. But amid the papers, I discovered something pivotal. A clause within the deed, common in custom builds in our area, that mandated a review by authorities if sold below market value within 5 years. The oversight was profound, and though David believed he'd won, he failed to see this coming. The county assessor's office was conducting a standard review, but this instance was unique. The clause outlined that in situations like this, the property would be reassessed at the current market value. Any discrepancy between the sale price and its market value would face immediate tax assessment, payable by the seller. Our home, valued at $2.8 million, had been sold by David for a mere $1, which meant the tax burden would be enormous and rest solely on him. The most interesting part? The clause was hidden within the deed restrictions, automatically transferring with the property. Alteration was impossible without my signature to release the restrictions. I grinned as I remembered David's expression when I mentioned the fine print. It didn't take long for him to realize. Likely when the county assessor's office informed him of the looming tax assessment. My phone buzzed with a message from David asking, "What did you do?" I dismissed it and focused on another document. It was a bank statement showing transfers from our joint account to a separate account under David's name. He had been steadily moving funds in preparation for his departure, but he'd made a key error. He'd financed the construction of the house from our joint account. Every dollar spent on building it traced back to our shared assets. In our jurisdiction, this meant I was entitled to half its value, regardless of the name on the deed. Another message came. "Answer me, Rebecca. What fine print?" I set my phone aside, checking the county assessor's website. Right on schedule, there was an alert for a review prompted by the recent sale. David was about to receive official notice. My phone rang, displaying David's name. I let it go to voicemail, allowing him time to stress. I spent the afternoon preparing legal documents, a claim for division of our marital assets, a request for an emergency injunction to halt any further property transfers, and a detailed ledger of every penny spent constructing the house. By the time I left the office, there were 7 missed calls from David and numerous increasingly agitated texts. The last read, "You knew about this. You knew this would happen." Naturally, I was aware. I was a real estate attorney specializing in property transfers and tax law. Did he really think I wouldn't ensure my own protection? As I drove home to our apartment, the one I insisted on keeping even after finishing the house much to David's displeasure, perhaps a part of me foresaw what would come. As I parked, I noticed David's car in the visitors area. He paced by the entrance, his previous smug attitude replaced by sheer panic. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he demanded as I neared. "The tax bill is more than I would earn in 5 years. I entered the code to our building, ignoring his plea. "That's unfortunate," I said. He followed inside, begging, "You have to help me fix this, Becca. You can release the deed restriction. I'll lose everything." I turned, recognizing the desperation in his voice. The man I'd loved for 12 years, who had betrayed me entirely, was now seeking my aid. "You've already lost everything," I replied quietly. "You lost it the moment you decided to give our dream house to your girlfriend. The tax bill is just He issued a threat, saying he would challenge the outcomes of his decisions by claiming ignorance of the clause." I chuckled. "Feel free. You signed the deed, David. You're a man of business. People expect you to read and comprehend what you signed. But go ahead, tell a judge you handed over a $2.8 million property for $1 without reviewing the deed restrictions. I'm sure that will go over smoothly." As realization set in, his face lost color. "What do you want?" he asked. "Want?" I echoed. "I desire nothing from you. You made your decision, and now you must live with the consequences." I unlocked my apartment door and entered, leaving him behind in the hallway. Through the door, I heard him call out, "What about Amber? She can't pay the property taxes." "Then she'll have to sell," I replied. "Perhaps she'll get more than $1 for it." I closed the door on his protests, leaning against it as my heart raced. The first stage of my plan was underway. David had just realized the tax repercussions of his rash decision, but the real shock was yet to come. Tomorrow, he would be served with my petition to divide marital assets. The following day, he'd be informed of the emergency injunction stopping further property transfers. By the week's end, he'd find out that his scheme to hide our joint finances was going to fail miserably. My phone buzzed again. Another message from David. "We can sort this out, please. I made an error." I set my phone to silent and poured myself a glass of wine. David was correct about one thing. He had indeed made a mistake, several in fact, but his gravest error was underestimating me. I seated myself at the desk and reviewed a stack of documents, every bank statement, every construction receipt, every transfer from our joint account, that all painted a narrative of betrayal and negligence. David was so engrossed in his affair with Amber that he'd become careless with the details, which, as any competent attorney knows, are crucial. The next morning I was at my office early. 3 manila envelopes lay on my desk, ready to be served to David. I checked my phone. 5 more missed calls and a series of increasingly frantic messages from him. The county assessor called. "The tax bill is $980,000. Please help me resolve this. Amber is panicking because she can't pay the property taxes. We can negotiate a solution." I set my phone aside and focused on my computer screen. County records confirmed the property transfer to Amber was officially documented. Excellent. Now she was liable for future property taxes, while David was accountable for the transfer tax bill. My assistant tapped on my door. "Rebecca, your 9 a.m. is here." I nodded, adjusting my jacket. "Show them in." Marcus Chun, the forensic accountant I'd hired, entered carrying a hefty folder. "You were right," he began. "The money trail is unmistakable. Your husband didn't just use joint funds for the house. He's been systematically reallocating assets for months. He spread documents across my desk, bank statements, transfer records, investment accounts. David had been orchestrating this for longer than I'd assumed. The good news, Marcus. The situation remained bleak as his incompetence in concealing his actions became more apparent. Every financial transaction had been recorded. He had the audacity to use our shared bank account as a conduit, perhaps believing it would make tracing more difficult, but instead, It provided a complete record of his dealings. I managed a grim smile. What's the total amount of redirected assets? Just over $3.2 million, excluding the house, came the reply. The staggering figure struck me like a physical blow. Years of building our life, and he intended to take it all away. My phone buzzed with a new message from David. The bank is threatening to freeze my accounts. What have you done? I had taken the step of filing a request for an emergency asset freeze as part of my divorce proceedings. Given the clear evidence of his financial scheming, the judge had approved it without delay. Marcus, organizing his papers, confirmed, the timing favors us. Most transactions occurred after he commenced his affair with Amber. We can prove premeditated fraud. I nodded, thanked Marcus, and saw him out. Back at my office, I found an email from the county assessor's office. They had completed the property transfer review. The formal tax bill was due today. Right on cue. My phone rang. Amber was on the other line, her voice unsteady. Miss Mitchell, she began, I need to discuss the house. I replied professionally, you mean the house you bought for $1? She rushed to explain, I didn't know about the property tax issue. David never mentioned it. I can't afford it, and the bank won't lend because I finished for her. Because you have no equity in the property since you only paid $1. She pleaded, I don't know what to do. David says his accounts are frozen, and I don't have that money. I considered her dilemma. She was barely older than my youngest sister. You should sell it, I advised. That's your best option. Taxes are due in 30 days. Selling now could allow you to cover them and walk away with something. But won't David be upset? She asked. I almost laughed. His anger is no longer your concern, Amber. He manipulated you, and it backfired. My advice, leave while you can. After a lengthy pause, she murmured, he said you were trying to take back the house. That's why he put it in my name. I don't want the house, I clarified. I want what's just. You're caught in the middle of a messy situation. Sell, pay taxes, and move on. Once I ended the call, I reflected on how much had changed within 24 hours. David's carefully laid plans were falling apart, and soon he'd understand his misjudgment. Days blurred with legal action. David hired one of the city's top lawyers, but even they couldn't contest the comprehensive documentation he left. Every transfer, account, and attempt to hide our assets was clear. The tax bill was indeed what we calculated, $980,000, with transfer tax due immediately. David's lawyer argued that the deed restriction was unfair, but the judge was unswayed. The clause was standard for our area, and David had consented to it. A week later, amidst the turmoil, I received some updates that changed everything. Amber called again, informing me she had decided to sell the house with an offer matching market value. She simply wanted to inform me, which I acknowledged as a wise move. She remarked, David is furious, claiming I'm betraying him despite everything he's done for me. Her bitter laugh suggested she thought she was helping me by involving me in this situation. Unexpectedly, I felt a wave of sympathy for her. Amber, you owe him nothing, I assured her. He used you to try hurting me, disregarding your well-being in the process. After the call ended, I reviewed the latest bank statements Marcus had sent. David's asset-hiding attempts had left an obvious trail, ensuring a fair asset division in the divorce. 2 weeks later, the house sold for $2.9 million. Amber settled the property taxes and had enough funds to start anew, reportedly returning to her hometown in Oregon. David, conversely, was now facing the repercussions of his actions. The hefty tax bill depleted most of his liquid assets, and the divorce exposed the depth of his financial schemes. Previously, his reputation was impeccable, but now it was in ruins. That evening, while examining settlement documents in my apartment, I received a text from David. You've destroyed everything I built. I thought about replying, emphasizing our joint efforts and his decision to ruin it all, but instead, I set the phone aside, gazing at the city lights. The dream house was gone, bought by a family with 3 kids who'd value it. My life plan with David ended, yet something resiliently new was emerging. My phone buzzed again. I never thought you'd fight back like this. David's ultimate mistake was underestimating me, assuming I was complacently trusting, managing minor details while forgetting my expertise in property law and self-protection. The divorce settlement ended fairly, adhering to legal requirements for equal asset division. David's money hiding only fortified my stance, ensuring transparency in every financial account and transaction. 6 months later, in my new office as a newly appointed partner at my firm, I relished the breathtaking city view, but cherished the peace above all. The betrayal's sting lingered occasionally, but no longer consumed me. My sister texted, "Saw David at a restaurant yesterday. He looked terrible. Are you okay?" My smile was filled with the realization of how much I'd grown since uncovering that property transfer. "I'm better than okay," I replied. "I'm free." Finally, I was unburdened by betrayal, liberated from proving myself. Though David tried taking everything, he inadvertently revealed my true strength. The dream house was no more, but I remained, and that was priceless.